Well, we've got a few minutes. I'm going to start promptly at 12:15. I'll tell you early comers that we got a lot to get through, and I hope it's not too much of a rush, but I've tried to skillfully plan it that we'll finish on time, but leave you a lot of time as well to participate in breakouts and shout out discussions during our hour together. It is a phenomenally fascinating subject, spirituality, and you, depending on your backgrounds, you may all know a lot more about it than I do, but I'm here to learn as well as to try and unearth some thoughts within us all.
Lonnie, I'm glad to see you with us.
Glad to be part of it. It was a bit of a chuckle choosing which of these workshops, and I realized all three that I chose are about seniors and old and all that kind of stuff. So I thought I'd grow a beard just in preparation for it. I've never had one of these before. This is my COVID offering, is growing the beard. There we go.
Stuff.
Lonnie,
where are you, Lonnie? Where are you, Lonnie?
One of our Canadians.
Oh, Canadians. Cool.
I'm from Prince Edward Island. I had the joy, though, of serving on the APSI cabinet for about 7 or 8 years, representing the PCC. And this marks 25 years since I first started coming to this wonderful place. And I'm glad to reconnect this year.
Very good. Oh. Yes, thank goodness for Zoom, because as I say, we're all over the country and some places of the world, and at least we can connect inexpensively, and it's never as good as face-to-face, but hey, we make the best of things when we need to, right? Anybody else from outside the CONUS of the US? Anybody in even Alaska, or anybody else from Canada? Okay. I did type a message, which somehow seems to have gone. I was waiting till everybody was on before I sent it out. But anyway, I'm in the chat, and you all know how to get to the chat, I hope, at the bottom of your screen. But I'm going to put my email there, because if you didn't register for this particular workshop beforehand, and some of you did, and I sent out an email to a lot of you who'd said you were interested in this one. If you didn't register, I am going to send out the charts that I'll show you this morning, and I'm going to send you a lesson plan, because when I did the Older Adult Ministry certification course at Columbia Theological Seminary in Georgia, a wonderful lady there who's actually presenting this week, she taught us how to do lesson plans. And so this material that I'll talk about today is in a lesson plan, and I'm happy to share it with you all. So all you got to do is let me know you want it, and I'm typing in my email address now in the chat. But if you registered for the conference or this workshop prior to the conference, then I've got you, and you probably saw an email from me already. So when that comes to 12:15, I'm going to send this so that everybody's on, and we'll get it. Because if you join the workshop, you don't get the chat that happens before you join. So, right, I've posted it, and I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to get going. You can't see it in slideshow, can you? Because I think I have to select. There we go. Everybody good?
Yes.
Yes.
Cool. All right. So yes, I'm Chris Pomfret. Those of you who were on a few minutes ago heard my background. I'm a former vice president of the Presbyterian Older Adult Ministries Network. We have a conference every year, just like APSI does. I live in New Orleans, and I'm just a regular Presbyterian member, active on a was active on a session at my church in Ohio, but I now live in New Orleans. I created a series of topics called the Third 30, which is all about life from 60 to 90 and what happens typically to us. Everybody has a unique life journey, but we all know things happen as life goes on, and it tends to come as a bit of a rush as we age, and life is finite. So we have to face up to the realities of the final stage of our life, which I'll call the Third 30, but it kind of starts from 60 and goes on to whenever our last days on this earth are. And I became moved to do this. I'll call it a calling, because I watched my parents age in the United Kingdom. I was living over here, but as my parents aged, I felt, despite how wonderful they were and how much respect I had for them in their professional and personal lives, they struggled as they got older. And it was through lack of preparation and acceptance of what was going to happen. And obviously some fear there too. And I felt there was a better way to age than that. So I created a whole series of topics for discussions within church communities and others. And I'll share one of them with you today. So I'll also make sure you know my co-host, Sarah Lee, who's been wonderful all the way up to today. She's the moderator of the APSI Awards and Scholarships Ministry team out of Lubbock, Texas. So I really appreciate having her as my wingman today. So the purpose and outline of the workshop. The object is to give you a lesson plan, because I'm assuming most of you are church educators, and I'm sorry we don't have time to hear all of your introductions, but I want to give you something where you could perhaps just use it as a go-to tool to help your congregants explore and understand and become aware of their spirituality. If that's something you can use in the future, then I'll be pleased. So we'll talk quickly about what the Third 30 is. Then what is spirituality? And obviously we could talk all day about that. It's a fascinating subject. How we define our own spirituality, how we find it, which may be not as easy as we think, how we use it in our Third 30. So that's what I'm going to cover quickly, and you're going to help me unearth a lot of those things. So really quickly, the Third 30. As we grow up in life, I think we can all remember our mental and physical capability develops at a very fast rate. So here we are as young children growing up, and we don't realize that we're in this basically fast-flowing torrent river that's carrying us along at an amazing speed, but we just embrace it. The pace of life and the growth, it's just what it is, it's normal. And we start off being in a crib and with diapers, and we're basically helpless and dependent on parents. But then we get to the terrible twos, and we start being petulant and develop a mind of our own. And then before we know it, we've got a diploma and maybe going off to college and finding a job. We're getting married and having children, and typically we might be at about 30 years old. But when you look at where we've come from in those first 30 years, it's a phenomenal development of our mental and physical capability. But what happens next, I suggest to you all, is a flattening out of this curve. We've done most of our development, and now we put it into good use in these 30 years or so. Again, it's all just broad brush typical. There's nothing exact about this. It's just a cartoon. So we kind of build on our lives. We build a career. We build a family. We gain experience and wisdom. And we just carry on, and the trap is we get used to this kind of fairly flat line of physical and mental capability. We can do most things that we want to if we're average, typical people. But then there's the kind of brutal honesty of life where, when we get to 90 or 100, as many of us will do, being we're boomers, we can expect to be back down here. And so there'll be a retirement, but then there's this period here when maybe we're back in adult diapers this time. Maybe we're spoon-fed. Maybe we can't walk unaided. We become grumpy old men. I won't say the ladies do, but the men do. They make films about it, so it must be true. And we have to be prepared for that likely reality. It's, as I say, it doesn't happen to us all, but it's a big variation as we come down here. So at this point in life, when we get to our kind of 60-ish point, we need to kind of see this big warning that the financial people will always tell you to protect themselves, that the past 30-year performance of our life is no guarantee of the future. And we also could do with another warning that's plastered on our bathroom mirror that says, warning, dangerous precipice. We forget, as I said, that we're coming to this point and that we're not going to be going out here forever and ever and ever. And it's a danger if we think we can. We've got to be prepared for this downhill kind of direction. So that's the third 30 in a nutshell. And there's a whole bunch of things we can talk about within this. But today we're going to talk about this red line, and I'm indebted to the Reverend Dr. Nancy Copeland Payton, who was the keynote speaker at POAMN in 2014. And she didn't know I'd kind of come up with this third 30, but it's not like I've invented it. Lots of other people have got their own interpretation of this. But she said, as we grow older and everything else seems to diminish, there's one thing that grows in us, and that's our spiritual growth. This is what increases, but it perhaps hides in plain sight to a lot of us. We don't know it's there. Those of us who do, we're going to help each other find out how we discover it for ourselves. But I contend that for a lot of people, we don't know that our spirituality is there and is growing and is going to be our best asset. So I suggest to you that spirituality is a very ethereal, untangible kind of thing. You can't pick it up and get hold of it. It's what you feel. And here's some words that maybe describe it: enlightenment, compassion, karma, forgiveness, inner peace. These are all things we associate with it, but it's very intangible. Now, first thing I did was turn to the dictionary and see how it describes spirituality and spirit. And it's very disappointing because I will call them circular definitions. It constantly goes back to the word spirit. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but you may use this with your congregants as a starting point. These talk about, say, spiritual, relating to or consisting of spirit. Well, that doesn't tell me much. This one suggests it's all to do with sacred matters. And I want to ask you all today whether you feel it is related to sacred or religious matters and values, or whether there can be a disconnection. I'm not saying it's a severed connection, but does it have to be? Here's something on supernatural beings and spiritual, of relating to or involving spiritualism. Wow, that's not really a lot of great use, I would suggest. So you can see these other definitions here, and I didn't find them a lot of use. And then sensitivity or attachment to religious values. Well, could that be a part of it, or is that all of it? I want your input today on that. So I didn't think this was a lot of use, and so I turned further to some other things, and I started to like these better. This one from Alfred James, Pocket Mindfulness, is a little high level and what I call academic, an unbreakable relationship between the heart and the mind, internal harmony that allows us to endure the most harrowing of circumstances. Yeah, I know what they're getting at, but you as church educators, is this something you think would get all your group sitting around on a Thursday morning with a cup of coffee in your church hall? Would they all say, oh yeah, I get it now, right, I can go away and find my spirituality? I think it needs to be explained in a better way. So many people are identifying with being spiritual but not religious in this world, SBNRs. Apparently it's over 25% of Americans. And this kind of started to perhaps resonate with me and a lot of people. How we react with others, living more contemplatively, appreciating nature and the natural world. And there's an article you can read if you wish, you can download that. And then this simple one from the Himalayan Institute: the goal of spirituality is to heal and empower yourself. So these are all well and good. At least this is better than the dictionary. But I want to kind of explore what spirituality means to us as individuals. And it may be a different story or different description for every single person. So that's what I think your congregants would get most value from if you were to lead a kind of discussion group on this topic. So we're going to do breakout time, and we're going to have 6 minutes and I'll put 4 of you in a room at random, and I want you to discuss what spirituality means to you as a person. How do you see spirituality? And then when we come back, I won't ask every group necessarily. Somebody can pipe up and say, our group felt this, or just quickly explain what it is, because again, with maybe 10 or 12 groups, we don't have time to go through everybody. So I'm going to put you into breakouts, and we'll, hold on, let me find the bottom of my screen. I need to stop sharing. That's what I need to do. Okay, we got everybody back, pretty much. Okay, anybody want to reveal summaries of what you discussed? Anything good that came out of your chats? Just feel to shout out. You'll have to unmute yourselves first, and then just say briefly what you learned. And we'll share that for a few minutes. And Sarah Lee's going to try and capture these in the chat so that we've got them just noted down.
Group 9 was 2 pastor educators and a Sunday school teacher, all from different denominations, and 1 from international. So there's a wide variety there. We talked about the spirituality side of things being much more like the feeling part, and I drew a comparison between the historic splits in the Presbyterian Church in America between the head knowledge and the heart knowledge, and how we've always said the head knowledge was most important and we had to educate and all of that, which is true, but we forgot the heart knowledge, which for me, and as we talked in the group, for most of us, was that spirituality side of things, that living out what we learn here, how it becomes a part of us, and we live it out in our lives. Thanks, and that it really helps to be in community, do that.
Certainly, thank you. Yeah, we're a social species. The human being certainly needs community. Yeah. Anybody else want to offer a synopsis of their group?
Group 12. Here's the synopsis. Spirituality is having a connection to the Almighty, to the Holy Spirit, but not just to the Almighty and Holy Spirit, but a connection to other people of faith. It is a feeling, what I think Janice just said. It involves feeling. It's not just a head trip. It's reverence. You can't force it. It takes practice, constantly inviting the Spirit in, open hands, not clenched fists. It's a two-way street and something we have to tend, and we have to create time and space. That's it.
Thanks, Debbie. One more?
In our group, and I'm not sure what number we were, we talked about how the definitions you initially gave us, not a single one of them said anything about God. And, I think to all of us, we felt like God had to be in there somewhere. And then we talked a little bit about the difference between spiritual and religious. And we weren't sure what the difference was. We sort of thought that it had to do with institutionalization of religion.
Thanks, Kathleen. And I think, again, this is to perhaps help prepare what you may get from some of your congregants, because, the people who come to church are from a wide range, and you will feel what will resonate with your congregants, or what you can use to open their minds a little more to what they perhaps know or don't know about spirituality. So that's all very helpful. Thank you. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, and we'll move on, if I can. Somehow, So. There we go. Right. So everybody see my screen again. Let's see if I can make the, for some reason it's jumped back to the beginning, but not to worry. We'll get to the, so we will capture the comments that Sarah Lee has put in the chat. I'll populate this chart with them before I send it out to you all. But then here's perhaps what I anticipated you might have said. Being at peace with our age and our mortality, is that a piece of spirituality? Feeling gratitude for life, practicing forgiveness. Are these the kind of things we associate if we say somebody is spiritual? Providing effective mentorship, feeling that arm around somebody to nurture, mentor, encourage them, teach them. Leaving a legacy. How do we want to be remembered? If we're spiritual, might we be conscious of leaving a way that by which we're remembered, and it be an impactful way? I would say, again, sometimes the irony is that the legacy may be one that tells your loved ones how not to do it. Again, I feel my parents showed me how not to grow old smartly, and it's made me be on this passionate trip to teach people. So their legacy was of help, if you like. And then harvesting our lives. How do we look back on our lives and do, they call it life review, but harvest the things from our life and wrap our arms around those and use them in some ways. And showing appreciation to others. I think this is a big one. Those are perhaps, I suggest you elements of what might make up spirituality, but that's just a scratch the surface. As we say, it's a very mysterious and very complex word full of so many different elements. But thanks for what you shared in the time we had. And you can imagine if you were running a group discussion at your church for an hour and a half, I think you'd have a very vibrant discussion on these things. Okay, let's move on to searching and finding our own spirituality, because I think we have to help people once they've recognized that it may be within them. How are they going to search and find it? We tend to say, oh, he's a very spiritual person. So we're making a qualitative measurement or assessment of people's spirituality, but how do we find that and measure our own? Have we even been aware of it? Is it hiding in plain sight? It's there, but we weren't aware. When did we, or when do we become aware of it? And I'll remind you of the third 30 graph we saw 20 minutes ago, but some people, they'll become aware of it earlier in life than others. But maybe the important thing we can do is to help people discover their own spirituality that's there. And then how do we cultivate and optimize it? So again, we can go into a shout out for a few minutes, just basically, I'll leave those on the screen so you can see them for a few minutes, and then but just feel happy to shout out and say what's come to mind as I show you those questions. Anyone? Make sure you unmute yourself if you're going to speak.
Barb here, I think intuitively, we don't think we can measure spirituality, that because of its nature, it would be hard to measure.
Yeah, it is, certainly. But how do we, but how would we know we've got it, even if we don't measure it? Maybe I pose that question to you. How do you know that you've become spiritual or are spiritual?
Are we risking getting a little bit judgy if we think about qualities in people that would indicate that they are in a spiritual frame of mind?
Well, Linda, I was thinking more of maybe somebody could have shared a personal experience of how how they, maybe a day or a time when they became aware of their spirituality, their own, as opposed to thinking about whether somebody else is spiritual. And yeah, I'm certainly not looking to be judgy, but whether anybody had a personal experience of understanding how they found or searched for their spirituality to find it.
Our group talked about that often in nature, we're more aware. And for me, it's taking time within to be aware of God's presence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Remember a time at a denominational event, just right smack dab in the middle of a presentation, I just felt completely overwhelmed and overcome. And that to me was a very clear signal.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah, you may have had that as a ha-ha moment, or it suddenly hit you, or for others, they've become aware of it slowly. It wasn't a sudden shock thing, but again, I think congregants may want to explore these kind of things and understand how they might find their spirituality and how they go about searching for it. But it's easy once you got it, but it's how do you find it? Yes. Anybody else want to chip in before we move on? One more?
I'll chip in. I think everybody is spiritual. Some people have opportunity to have helps to make that grow. We talked in our group a lot about that, like things like creation, nature, those kinds of things. Not everybody has those opportunities, even nature that's all around us. They may not even notice it. Or so there's a lot of that. The birth of a baby. I mean, if the feeling, if you ever even saw a baby born or just saw a new baby, that feeling you get is spiritual, but not everybody would necessarily label it that way. So I think everybody's got it.
Right. And I think our job is to help people find and be conscious of that spirituality. That I think you're absolutely right, Rita. It's within us, but it's knowing that it's there, that perhaps we can help tease out of our church members. Glenda, did you have one thing you wanted to say?
Well, I was going back to the spirituality and meaningful words. I mean, if you feel forgiveness for somebody, or if somebody has shown appreciation to you, and it's a connection of like love and or gratitude when you're feeling that, but it doesn't, you can't be like that all the time, but I think you can practice some of these and feel that connection to God or to love more if you're thinking about it.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Glenda. All right. Well, we'll move on to the. So we've discussed that. We've talked about that. Let me just get into. So now, how do we use our spirituality, especially in our third 30? And these are some thoughts I put to mind, and you can add a few things if you think of other things. But a big one for me is accepting help. It's very easy as we get older to feel it's a sign of weakness to accept help. And my strong message to people when I give these talks is to say, by accepting help, we're giving to the person who offers it to you. So I think that's lost on a lot of us. Many times our knee-jerk reaction is to, no, I can cope, I can carry this, or I can open the door. I'm not that old that I don't need help. Well, I tell people to fake it, say that you do need the help or accept the help, whether you need it or not, because you'll be giving to the person offering it. And it's turning upside down what our conventional typical behavior can be. Practicing grace and becoming more selfless in our day-to-day actions, and thinking that even though we tend to be respected generally by because we're older, it's good to be modest and give back to or make life more about other people than ourselves. And that's connected with the next one, showing maybe humility and modesty. I like to encourage people to talk about their death because it shows they're at peace with the reality of death, and trying to encourage people to write an ethical will or their life story, the life review. And there's a lot of books and talk about that these days, which I'm pleased about. Being civil, which perhaps is very important in our country in this day and age, the golden rule, let's treat people, again, being conscious of treating people the way we'd like to be treated. Just day-to-day civility will, I think people would wrap that into using spirituality, just being conscious of that. Helping others invisibly, just doing things that we don't get credit for, or maybe they don't even know who did what, but you're helping people because it's the right thing to do and you're mindful of it as you do it. And I think this is one that is a 24/7 thing, is always trying to be mindful of the situation we're in. As some of you mentioned, just being aware of nature and the earth and the life that we're in and the particular environment we're in at the time, whether it's a grocery store or walking along a riverbank, just being mindful. And then, of course, minimizing denial and maximizing realism. Perhaps fear forces us into denial. And if we can find that peace with life and the way things are and the situation we're in, we're more at peace with life. So are there any other examples that anybody would like to add? I'll go back to our big screen. Any other thoughts that list provoked that you could add to?
I was wondering, could you explain ethical will? What is an ethical will?
Okay, that's more of a how you want to leave your values in life, if you like, what you felt was important, and how you think living life is optimized, and what you think was important in living your life. So we're all familiar with financial wills, but the ethical will is perhaps what you saw as the values in life and what you think is a good way to live your life. Anybody else want to weigh in on that question from Doreen?
Can I say something? I find that interesting, but I've never heard of it before. Is there a book you can refer to us to?
Not off the top of my head. I can't think of one. I got a whole bookshelf behind me of stuff, which I'm sure there may be. There's a book by Rabs. Let me see if I can pull it off my shelf.
Books on ethical wills.
I think there's a section in here, in this book by Zalman. He's a rabbi, Rabbi Zalman, From Aging to Saging. That's one. I think it's in there, but I'll do some search and find. But yeah, you could probably Google ethical will. And
this is Art Van Eck speaking.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear Art Van Eck? Hello.
You're broken up.
My name is Art Van Eck, and I joined you late. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you can.
Here's a couple books on ethical wills. Ethical wills and how to prepare them. So you Google that and you'll find out the author. There's another one, So That Your Values Live On. Ethical wills and how to prepare them. It's a different book. That comes from Thrift Books. The first one is $17 and the second one is $4.09. Well, anyway, one more, ethical wills. It's just called Ethical Wills. So if you Google that, you'll find the resources for ethical wills.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's a good thing for people to become aware of and again, talk about within your church groups.
Could you post those, type those into the chat, please, Art?
Gee, I wish I knew how to do that, but I don't. I'm such a neophyte here that.
I have just done those three.
Yeah.
In the chat.
Google it.
Yeah.
They're already there.
Yeah, Sarah Lee's put them in chat, so you'll have to just Google the author and the details, but you'll find it so easily. Thank goodness for Google. Okay, we're going to move on. I'm going to jump.
Christopher, could I add one thing to your list?
Yes.
Some type of meditation, whether it's contemplative prayer or walking prayer, where you just walk around and say something, that type of thing. That not everybody can do it or wants to do it, but yeah. I find it really helpful.
Thank you. Great input. I like that. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to go back to share my screen, then we're going to go into our next breakout, and I'll tell you ahead of time. Those of you who had registered for this or showed interest in this workshop got notice of the question, and we've been touching on it a little bit already. And I'll say it's a little controversial, but I think it's what your congregants would want to know. Oh, by the way, here's some Bible verses that one could use. I've just picked out 4. There's many, but you can read these in your own time at some other time. But if you needed stuff for your discussion group or lesson plan, there's some Bible verses. So this is a controversial question, if you like, but I think it's one we have to address. We can't ignore. And the answer isn't just necessarily, oh yes, absolutely. Let's really explore whether people can be spiritual without having a really strong faith or it being dependent on whatever faith they've got. So it may touch on the spiritual but not religious people, but I want to get your views as to, how much you feel somebody to be spiritual has to depend on their faith. And I want you to have a spirited discussion about that, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Again, if you want to speak, unmute yourself, but we'll spend literally 2 or 3 minutes just hearing from what you all thought. Was it a resounding yes, absolutely, spirituality depends on faith, or something else? People just unmute and speak up.
A definite no.
Okay.
Because God's in everything. I mean, and it's about love, and some people who don't think they're the spiritual but not religious, I think they're thinking of religion as the people who think you all have to believe the same thing.
Right.
Instead of an experience with the holy, with God. And everybody can, I think everybody's spiritual.
Yeah.
I think somebody else said that.
Any other comments from people? I gate crashed one group, and in one sentence, I think we were talking about how the challenge for us as church educators might be to show congregants how religious faith will feed spirituality. Maybe take it from the other way around and saying, oh, if you're spiritual but you're not religious, perhaps show people how religion feeds their spirituality, even though they may not have known it. Maybe we have to draw their attention to it and let them see it.
I think that the identification of it, the awareness of it, and articulation of it are the keys that we're talking about in some ways as educators and pastors, rather than the definition of it, but the identifying it.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm really sorry that we only have an hour, because I think we could have a whole day discussing this, but we've got like 7 minutes left, so I wanted to leave time for any parting words from you folks, but I'm just going to show what I think maybe some of the things we said, and again, you can add to this when I get to the bottom of the chart. I would contend that spirituality, whether we realize it or not, is our most valuable attribute as we age. When everything else is diminishing, this is growing and becomes our kind of rock, our crutch, whatever you want to call it. I propose respectfully to you all to forget any academic, complex, fluffy definitions. Not that I'm against anything academic and high level, but I feel simple words are going to work best for our congregants when we try to talk about this mysterious topic. And spirituality just doesn't get delivered to our door like an Amazon package. It's a challenge that God gives us to go and search for it and find it, practice it, and then we're going to repeat over and over. The searching doesn't stop, I would suggest to you. Once you've found it, you're going to find new elements within it. So you've not necessarily found it all in one go. You're going to keep finding pieces. And that's going to make it more wholesome, but you can then practice whatever you found and recognized in your day-to-day life. And as I gave this an awful lot of thought, I kind of, again, try to simplify things really easily so that any congregant will understand it and be able to get a hold of it. And maybe if you had to think of one word, my suggestion is it's mindfulness. And I read somewhere recently that mindfulness in a lot of clergy's minds is another word for prayer, which I found very interesting. But thoughts on that? We've got like 4 minutes. Anything people want to say or add to that?
Chris, it's Lonnie Atkinson.
Yeah.
We had some discussion about mindfulness in our group. By the way, our breakout group was 4 Canadians together, so it's dangerous in itself. The joys of random selection.
Yes.
The concern about mindfulness for me is that it I think is a focusing of the spiritual only in one part of our essence. I mean, when I think of spirit, I think of the soul, I think of our gut, I think of our hearts. And so mindfulness sometimes to me, I mean, it's all about the emptying and getting into that clarity of, and I believe greatly in meditation and all sorts of other things, but I'm concerned somewhat that we're chasing after an avant-garde word with mindfulness these days and need to see how the true spiritual life is the essence of all that is us, all of who we are. And so that's just a comment about mindfulness.
Thank you. Any other comments? Please, we've got a few minutes.
I have one clarification. I want to make sure I heard correctly. I forget who said it, but what I wrote down was, because God is in us all, we are all spiritual, whether we know it or not.
Like it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I've not tried to, I would not even begin to want to tell any of you, how to teach this subject. It's just floating some ideas that, again, I'm almost purposely controversial just to stir our minds up. And that was the purpose. And for some of you, you'll want to use it. For some of you, want to reject pieces of this, but it's to help us think how we bring this out ultimately in our congregants, especially those in their third 30, how we help them recognize spirituality and cultivate it. So that's my fickle purpose, if you like, was to stir things up a bit. Any other comments? We've got like 2 minutes.
Well, thank you for bringing it to my consciousness. This has been good.
Yeah.
I'd like to say, you were talking about it being our most valuable attribute as we age. And I have a lot of folks that I work with that are in like retirement homes. And I think about how affirming that is to, encourage people to say this, this is your time. You have such experience. And it reminds me too, how do we give them a venue where they can share their stories with others, whatever age they might be. And story means a lot to me because I'm a storyteller. So I really like that affirmation, but it's like, how do we connect to affirm them so that they can share and feel good about their attribute?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're trying to bring them out, bring out our church members to, discover things they didn't know about themselves. Anybody else? Okay. Well, again, I put my email at the beginning of the chat. Hopefully you see it. If you want a copy of the lesson plan that I put together on this, it's just a framework that they say you can use. You can reject parts of it or add to it to customize it to your own way. But I felt for this conference, that might be the best thing I could offer to you, would be a lesson plan on a topic that would, if we were back in normal times, would be great sitting around a table with cups of coffee or a lunch and in the church fellowship hall. Hopefully you could use it sometime in the future in that way, otherwise on Zoom. But I want to thank you all for your attention and inputs. It was important to hear what you had to say, not just what I had to say. And I've learned a lot from your comments. So thanks very much and enjoy the rest of the conference. It's been a pleasure seeing you all.
Chris, do you want to mention that you do have a resource page, a list of resources in your presentation, which will be accessible to people after the conference?
Yes, absolutely. Again, there's a PowerPoint presentation. I've got some useful reading at the end of it, as well as at the end of the lesson plan I wrote. You'll all get that as a matter of course, whether you want it or not. I'm going to email it to you all. And if you weren't on the original email list that showing interest in this workshop, then send me an email with your interest and I'll get it to you separately after this is over. Okay. Thanks, Sarah Lee. I want to thank Sarah Lee for helping out so well, and she's been typing furiously to capture all the comments, and we'll make sure we get those out to you all as well.